So about a year ago I set out to beat Skyrim as Santa Claus to celebrate the holidays, and given it is that time of year again, I figured it is time for old Saint Nick to spread holiday cheer, or for the naughty individuals, fear. As today we will try to complete Fallout 4 as Santa Claus. It should be pretty obvious who our protagonist is. He is probably the most recognizable person in the world after all. Also, to spare everyone the misery of last year, I will not be doing non-stop rhyming, no rhyme or reason this time, at least for now. As for the rules for the run, which I define as very loosely, I don't really have much. There is the Creation Club DLC that features holiday-related items, including the Santa attire, so obviously we'll be wearing those for the run. As for weapons, I have two in mind. The first, in Santa Claus, is a pretty chill man. I will be using any ice-related weapons, namely the cryolator family and any weapons that have the freezing effects like cryomine. And also, I'll be allowing myself the usage of the junk jet. Given how much stuff Santa has in his sack, I am sure you can probably weaponize gift giving. Also, I should mention I'm going to be very loose on the typical bonus rules for the run, mostly because ammo concerns for 1, for 2 wanting to make Santa lore accurate, and 3 showing off stupid stuff as usual. As for the bonus objectives, I want to do any quest that involves kids and families, reuniting them, etc. And here's my list of quests. Yeah, this isn't going to be a very short video, that's for sure. So with that all the way, let's get started. So when creating my character, I started from the beginning to the wonderful home of Mr. and Mrs. Claus, and I did my best effort for the creation process, given my limited abilities. As for my special stats, it was honestly very hard. You can make the argument that every one of Santa's special stats should be at a 10. Strength at 10 because he has to be strong enough to carry around that sack of presents, Perception at 10 because he will see if anyone is awake, Endurance because he has to work for more than 24 hours in a night, Charisma because Santa has the ability to calm even the most rambunctious of children, Intelligence at 10 because he always knows if you have been naughty or nice, Agility at 10 because he can do his entire shtick undetected, and Luck just because he only has to work one night a year. I settled with these stats if this was an ordinary run, but given how I like to showcase dumb stuff, this won't last very long. Anyways, we play for Sean for a little bit, and on the floor there's a little bear for Sean's Christmas present, Mr. Snuggles. But before a fun holiday season, there is breaking news, big Christmas trees begin to light up, and we get to watch one firsthand. Inside the vault, I crawl into my cryo chamber and watch in horror Mrs. Claus get shot by Krampus, and sadly there is nothing I can do, at least for now, until I emerge from my pod 200 missed Christmases later. So at this point, I just booked it right through the vault, making the local radroaches wait in their rooms for the presents they will not be getting because once I step outside, their existences will cease to be. Back outside in the fresh air in a couple months before the holiday season, I figured it is time to get some setup done. The first step is to make Santa's special stats lore friendly, and while I could console command my way to 10 special in every stat, I thought I could showcase a fun little glitch, since glitches are my crutches when playing video games. The most important thing for the glitch, well I need two things. The first is I'm going to need the special book, and while I'm here I found Mr. Snuggles hiding in a corner, a survivor of the Great War. By the Lord, I will get Mr. Snuggles to Sean if it's the last thing I do. I then start scrapping Sanctuary like my many ideas and runs through the years for potential crafting later on. The second key component to this glitch requires a melee weapon with only one thing to modify, so things like boards, walking canes, and other weak melee weapons. I scoured Sanctuary like no tomorrow and no luck, and the body outside of town had a tire iron, which could work for the glitch but I didn't have the right perks, so I wandered down the road a bit until I got into Concord. I watched Preston make a slip off the balcony, then resumed fighting on the top level. I then led a raider with a switchblade around in circles as Preston continues his auditions for the stormtroopers until the raider finally dropped and I got my switchblade for the glitch. Except I need the blacksmith perk to upgrade it, so I'm back to pounding the Concord. At least the return visit, the first raider I saw had both a pool cue and knuckles, which works for my plan. So I guess time to break the game in a non-serious playthrough of a single player game. So for the glitch to work, first you need to make sure you have no weapons in your inventory except for the one you're going to use for the glitch, name it after the worst social media site, and save. Then you want to basically press scrap and modify at the same time, or modify one frame after scrap until you are on the screen. Confirm the scrap and you will be able to modify your special book, then put on a mod onto that book. The next step is a good old-fashioned item duplication that does not involve dog. Drop the special book on the ground, go into the workshop menu, press scrap and hold down the store key, and you want to wait about a quarter second between the scrap and store, and you'll see this weird glitch screen. Hit the scrap and then store the book, drop the book on the ground, and voila, you can become even more special. I then spent close to 20 minutes doing this until all my special stats hit level 10, making me close to the actual Santa. So for my next major glitch, I want to get my hands on the cryolator, and normally it's supposed to be obtained at level 18 behind a master lock, but the solution is very simple. I brought dog meat into the vault, crouched by the entrance to bring him in, take him down to the cryolator room and lock him in after taking everything from inside it. Then I made Dogmeat play fetch with an item, and if things go well, Dogmeat will break space-time to get the cryolator and gives me my pun maker. If that doesn't work, then I have to reload the game. And lastly, since 200 cryo cells won't last me very long since vendors won't have them in their item pools until a much higher level, I just dupe the ammo with my tried and true method until I'm comfortable with the run. All 3 of these glitches I learned from Demon Asylum, and there are so many more glitches I could have used for the run, but I don't want to make things too easy now. I then left out of Concord to head to the diner, and then put the stick up on ice, and get rewarded with delicious experience for my troubles. Afterwards, I gave Dogmeat a dashing pair of goggles because Rudolph is going to need some glasses to fly through the clouds, which is full of cloud droplets somewhere between freezing and negative 36 Celsius, and then off he went. Next up, I want to get my other half of my armory, and that is the ability to weaponize consumerism. I wander towards the police station like I'm magnetized to it, then I proceed to stop the aggressive zombies cold in their tracks. I then resupplied at the station, got the solar powered perk because that perk is so darn good but the cost is very steep, then began my hike to Arcjet. I couldn't save the caravan, but that doesn't mean I can't at least avenge them. Inside the labs, I put the computers through the leaky coolant situation and ruined their $2,000 GPU, and throughout the excursion, because my stats are jacked, I took the fights to them in basically no clothing. Inside the basement, I grabbed my second half of the arsenal, the junk jet. You can load up any pieces of junk into the weapon, and it does alright damage, but because of how heavy the ammo is, I can't keep a lot on hand, so instead I use a bit of fats to compensate for my NA aim. The nice thing about the junk jet is that there's a decent chance you can recuperate your ammo, but half the time it just glitches out. Eventually I went back to the cold shoulder treatment to finish the dungeon, and gave Dance a nice present, which she gives me another right back. Back inside Sanctuary, I do a slight upgrade on the junk jet, anything to get more mileage out of this weapon. Then after getting squirreled enough, it's like I have attention issues or something, I wander towards Diamond City, helping out the guards fight off some mutants, then forcefully persuading Piper to let me into the city, but not before using my butterfingers to skip a few detours. Though I could probably persuade the mayor and play things out morally, but I'm a deeply flawed individual, my morals are greater than my hairs. Anyways, the reason why I came to Diamond City was to start my Creation Club quest, which leads me south to the department store. You know, notes, the Creation Club specialty. I am pretty nervous coming down this way because Fallon's has some pretty strong mutants in the area, a lot of quarterbacks here, and on my way there I let the cold jokes fight the bear jokes, on which is more cringeworthy. However, there was no chance the bears were coming out of this unscathed. Shoulda hibernated. Anyways, behind Fallon's department store there is a mall Santa trying to shoot at me, either from how potent the cryolator is, or my special stats plus lore accurate power scaling. Raymond was no match at all, and I can claim the kids' presents back for the holiday season. Expected really, the source of Christmas consumerism originated in the mall after all. I got my supply of Christmas hats, some of the not safe for vault variety, then gave Dogmeat some antlers, and it just works so bloody well. Afterwards, I decided to play with the mutants here, and by throwing a Hail Mary I could land a touchdown pass, and then I just warped out of there. I want to get some defenses going first before going totally wild. I return to Diamond City, and like the Santa I am, I deliver the presents to the kids at the schoolhouse many months early, and wrapping up probably the most important quest of the run. One down, so many more to go. I then left Diamond City to hike to the better town Good Neighbor, but not before utilizing a bit of my power. Inside Good Neighbor, I gave Finn a chilly reception, then headed into the third rail. One of my major side tasks is to help out McCready save his son, so I hired the Merc to tag along. Also, I started to steal from the store just so McCready likes me a little bit more. We are pretty opposite on the morality spectrum after all. It's going to be pretty annoying trying to maintain the Santa aesthetic. On my way to the church, I might have taken a wrong turn and angered a holiday shopping crowd worth of mines, while marking some locations for later, all the while making sure gunners get the chills. Also made one raider temporarily ascend to the heavens. Inside the church I had some mild troubles. I tried to chill one of the ghouls, but seems it did from this plane of reality and crashed my game. Twice. Third yo, I just ignored all the reality unstable ghouls and typed in the secure password and questioned the railroad, flexing my speech skills after all. As much as I would love to stop the railroad cold in their tracks, I decided to help them out since I have some pretty tough fights coming up. I thought Ballistic Weave might really help out, which is the only reason I'm bothering with him in the first place. South of the diner I talked to Dance and his friend, then began diving through the tunnels. Pretty similar all things considered to my Pyro video, just replace fire with ice. Almost makes this run as repetitious as my average Skyrim run. The close quarters makes things pretty safe for me to take out the synths, at least until the big room, but with the power of hypothermia the synths could be taken out with relative ease, and I just laugh at their attempts at an ambush. While the prototype is secured, Deacon gives me a weapon I can't use because he doesn't comprehend weapon restrictions, and I add some cryo mines to my repertoire. Back at HQ, I give a present to Carrington, and despite having Care in his name, the doctor is rather jaded about it, and sends me out to Bunker Hill. But before then, there is a magazine on the table that boosts the damage of the cryolator. I mean, I have to take it. On my way to Bunker Hill, my spherical brain decided to get distracted and decided to take care of Pickman's gallery. Instead of weaponizing 100 minions, I decided to instead chill the raiders out. Eventually, the house turns into the average social media platform, just full of generic fodder enemies. Eventually, I come out to the end and rescue Pickman. In reality, I probably should have killed him in the first place, but he gives me a gift, so I mean, I guess I could spare him. I returned to the main house and got one of the best melee weapons in the game, and then left. Inside Bunker Hill, I talked to the stock market and began the babysitting mission. I would have been smart and just go right to the building, but it seems High-Rise wanted to take down a tower of super mutants. Since I have extreme range issues with my ice beam, instead I threw my garbage at the mutants, and I guess with my stupid luck stat I could keep one launched and crit attacks from afar. I forgot just how absurd VATS can be. I decided I had enough and took the fight to the building myself, and proceeded to break the laws of physics to wipe out the mutants just so High-Rise can do its actual job, only to avoid going through the tower in the first place and wasting my time. Oh well, my mission is complete and returned to the railroad to get the Mercer Safe House quest started, and since I was in the neighborhood, I decided to help the Abernathy's for later. Afterwards, there's a quick hike to the south until I got to cabin 420, where I ended the Ghoul's High so I can convert the settlement into a safe house. I then relayed the good news to Pam, and next up is a raiding quest to get a cache so I can finally get my weave. Problem is that it is in a danger hospital. Well, I crossed the bridge and hiked a little bit up to the north until I came across a Slocum Joe's. Inside the building, I accidentally deposited all my junk items, so I needed some junk before the football game. Well, the raiders went down easily enough, and inside a desk I found a secret recipe and food that might be considered on par with my cooking. Well, at least I have some junk for my jet, so I let McCready take a difficulty spike. Inside the hospital, once again I relied on McCready's invincibility to take the one shot, then I went through the place giving the once brave super mutants cold feet. I got my cash, then returned to the railroad to get my weave, so now my body can take more than a gust of wind. Also, when buying from Tom, he was selling a walking cane, which is a good video and you should probably check it out. And that is the end of my railroad excursion before I get any more off track from my plans. Back in Diamond City while looking for fiber, I hit the first milestone with McCready, so now I can start his quest. I then departed to the south of Arcjet, taking the time to mark Fort Hagen on the map for later, and since I'm very distracted while playing, I wandered right into the loving jaws of a Deathclaw, but spray and pray. Eventually I made it to the interstate and I began to throw down with the gunners. I called my lift and get whisked away to play with traffic, and of course one of the cars is an Assaultron, but cars don't like to start when it's very cold out. I then rushed inside a hut and proceeded to funnel everyone inside my icebox. Then once all the main characters were done, I can start to clean up house. Eventually McCready is indebted to me and gives me a return on my investment. Alright, third of the way done with McCready. Well, I have left Preston hanging for how long now? I figured now would be a good time to help clear out the museum. I reenacted George Washington's crossing of the Delaware, which is actually very accurate given the theming of this video. Eventually I reached the gravy train and I grabbed the perception bobblehead, which lets my perception be bumped to 11, so I guess I could go around gathering more bobbleheads. Just go overkill. I returned outside to continue the ice age and rushing down the aggressive lizard. Thankfully it is cold-blooded and goes down without too much fuss. I then joined the Minutemen and led everyone back to Sanctuary to get started on their quest line. I did put this to a vote a while back, and it was very overwhelming you all wanted Santa to join the Minutemen, so I will oblige. Honestly, I expected the railroad to get the most votes, but oh well. I guess I can get started on doing more settlement quests. On my way to the satellite dish, I decided to help clear out the quarry since, truth be told, I have never cleared this place out, like, ever. This is the first time I ever did this quest. I did sweet talk more caps out of this quest to make McCready more happy, then I did a polar plunge to fix the valves. I then treated myself to some Alaskan crab meat and then continued on my way. Inside the array, I began to freeze the antenna reminding the raiders why satellite sucks during storms, or at least it did when I grew up. The place wasn't that hard, but McCready did grab a minigun and suddenly became the main character of this playthrough. Next up, I went down the road a bit and helping out the settlers here, then returning to the Abernathy's and finishing their quest. I then went back to Lexington to start the assembly plant. Between my condensation breath and McCready's overkill, the raiders pose no threat whatsoever. It is kind of funny how between my body partless mod and the cryolator, the turrets turn into ice blocks. Jared was then told to let it go, that being his life force, and I made my escape through the tunnels and back into the loving arms of unnamed NPCs, and I can relay the info to Garvey and get it inducted into the Minutemen, which McCready likes. Since settlements are the name of the game, next up is the Starlight Drive-In, which was a quick process all things considered. Garvey sent me to the National Guard site, and because I can't focus, at this point I started getting drunk on eggnog again. It's a very dangerous holiday habit, okay? I put off settlements for a long while, I then returned to Park Street Station and decided to throw hands with Swan. Swan did not bother migrating, and thus felt the joys of having their pond freeze over, and the minigun is just hilarious. Inside Park Street Station, the Triggermen were not wearing any winter clothing and thus met a very cold demise. Since Santa might as well be a demigod at this point, the Triggermen didn't last very long. I was originally going to use the cryo gun to freeze Dino and say the Ice Age killed the dinosaur, but nah, instead it was a funnier option to whack him with some copper. Irony in the statement in some ways. The old Saint Nick rescues regular Nick, and together we work away out of the vault. Well, it's more just me icing the mobsters. As for the dietary man, instead of wanton violence, I convinced Darla it was a bad idea and told her to go back home to her family, which she obliges. And once she was out of the picture, then I resorted to wanton violence. With them out cold, we left the station and returned to Diamond City. Seems I came at a very good time as today was Halloween, aka the last day retailers have to deal with the annoying October holiday preventing them from having Christmas decorations and products everywhere, and also the day before Mariah Carey awakens from her slumber to begin her radio station rampage. I then had to sit down with Nick. Sadly, he didn't want to sit in my lap. I got my info, then began to data mine the cereal factory for any holiday flavors. Seems it is cigar flavored this year. I then returned outside and talked to my Rudolph and did an interview with Piper. Media outlets sure do love to stalk Santa after all. Then afterwards we have a synthetic time at Fort Hagen, meaning chilling the processors until they stop moving. The fort cleanup was pretty straightforward. Point out a synth until they stop twitching, and with the close-natured setup at the fort, I could close the gap pretty quickly and not have to worry about damage too much. I also got my favorite bobblehead because I'm quite the energetic individual. As for Mr. Krampus, I gave this naughty individual all the coal he deserves, and with a few concussions he is down for good, and I can clean up the ads. Eventually I got my brain matter, looked at a wish list, then watched over compensation move in. Afterwards I returned to Nick and got my quest done, then went to Good Neighbor to go through some brain matter on the joy of Christmases past, which no one really cares about in repeat playthroughs. And when I'm done with the trip down memory lane, McCready jump scares me and we have a nice conversation, 2/3 of the way done with the prereq for his final quest. So with the greenery coming up soon, I figure I could do some side activities in the meantime, and I thought now would be a good time to go head to the most dangerous part of the map. Heading south out of Boston, I cleared out a gunner hangout and wandered into University Point. While McCready was having a shootout, I was playing some basketball, and I got pretty excited when I scored a basket. Then I relived my good old university days walking through sub-zero temperatures on my way to class. Down the road is a lone refrigerator with a kid inside. I rescued him, and while escorting him to his family, I was jumped by a Marler King and Bullet. I did the only right thing to do. So the only obstacle between Billy and his parents is Quincy, and I don't really fancy a nuke to the face right now, so I snuck around to the west until I could reunite the kid with his family, wrapping up this holiday story. And since I was in the area, I thought I could be a fist to the Northern Star. I reminded the Norwegian raiders of their homelands and claimed my agility bobblehead, which isn't the intelligence bobblehead I was thinking of, which actually matches my intelligence. I then traveled to the Boston Library and began to clear out the halls of any mutants. I am very much not a reader. Instead, the super mutants here met an icy demise straight out of a storybook. Or something, the eggnog is really affecting my brain at this point. There really wasn't much to note, just a lot of mutants. Inside the back room is an intelligence bobblehead that bumps my brains up to 11. So while Idiot Savant is a 1% chance, oh boy, the gains are so delicious. Probably one of my very few smart brain plays. Maybe, probably not. Well, at this point I figured now would be a good time to start Vault 81. They are pretty important for the run, considering they have 3 quests tied to them that I want to do. But first things first, I cleared out the alley to get closer to my final settlement total. Further off to the west, the Super Mutants and Brotherhood soldiers were really going at it, and since I have a cat spawn nearby, it would probably be for the best to de-escalate the situation. Well, as much as I can. Inside the vault, I use my charming ways to persuade the vault residents to let me in. Inside the vault proper, I let Austin set himself up as a plot device while he gives me a grand tour, and then I'm told a cat got outside and I need to rescue it. Funny, rescuing cats out of trees is supposed to be an early game quest, not something about halfway through the recording. The quest is super short and only takes about a minute, and thankfully the quest is resolved happily. I then donated some blood. The holidays are when blood donations are needed the most after all. Though I probably should have done blood first, cat second, so disregard my smart brain quote I said about a minute ago. I then waited outside and the quest wouldn't want to start, which is fine by me. Knowing McCready, he would want to keep the cure for himself, so I figured I could return after I finished this quest. But I do at least attend the lecture on how I killed a Deathclaw. The 3 shots is pretty close to accurate after all, but I did not use the power armor. Next up I went up the way to the boathouse and freeze-dried mosquitoes here for another settlement, then enter Covenant. Just had to give some interesting responses that are somewhat accurate if you believe Futurama. Well, next up I had to play detective as there was a missing caravan, and one such suspect includes Deezer's nuts. and I spent a while snooping around because I have not done this quest in a very long time. I tend to take the settlement with force. After trial and error and forgetting about the main house, I get the location of the bunker and enter inside. I use my charismatic ways to avoid combat, at least for now, and head right to the mad scientist. I could leave the girl to die, but family comes first, so I proceed to purify the Covenant. Is this a total net loss? Yeah, probably, but I don't really care. I just want the brownie points with McCready right now. Once I eminent domain the settlement, I began to clear out the National Guard site finally. It is one of my staple locations at this point, and I just stopped their undead hearts cold. As for the glowing one, I turned it into a Christmas tree, and a pretty one at that too. I then walked down the road a little bit, and took on the settler's quest, but not before being followed by the funny ghouls again. Thankfully the location they need me to go to was already visited, so the journey was a very quick one. The dungeon was thankfully on the shorter side of things, and before too long I Sparta kicked the boss into a frozen pit, then rescued the settler here and escorted them back home, wrapping up another settlement for a 2-for-1 special they play 17 ads for online. I then returned to Sanctuary and upgraded my cryolator into a snowball launcher, so now there is no chance for my weapon to fall off. Oh yeah, the cryolator now classifies as an explosive weapon now, and I can spend perks to upgrade. I told Preston the good news, and now we can claim a castle for ourselves, so I hurried on over there. At the castle, I shoved all the crab legs I could muster into the refrigerator, because nothing quite beats frozen crab legs, or I'm just insane, who knows. I duped the cryolator beforehand, so I have some spread for the eggs. Someone has to bring the unsolicited deviled eggs to the holiday party after all. Well, the queen crab comes out to play, and Santa, being the demigod he is, just decimates the queen in a few seconds, and the castle is ours for the taking. Yeah, Santa is extremely powerful. If it weren't for power scaling, it might have been more interesting, but oh well. I told Preston the good news, and now I can forget about the Minutemen for quite a long time. Well, next up is the glowing sea, and the closest spot I wanted to travel to is the department store, so now the small Santa can have his revenge, spreading the powers of capitalism to the mutants here. I went down the road a ways to the marina and convinced Phyllis to hand the settlement over free of bloodshed, and I continued my way across the river. There's supposed to be an alpha deathclaw here, but turns out it was just a beta because they don't play games on the hardest possible difficulty because of gamer culture. Inside of the barren land of sadness known as Nebraska, I sprinted my way across the map, and really nothing to note happened besides a few rat scorpions go down quick enough. I randomly decided to check in on McCready's affinity, and turns out I can start his final quest, so the end is in sight. Just during our heartfelt conversation, we were jumped by stingwings. We were trying to have a friendly bonding moment, you pricks. Well, before I send away my immoral friend, first up, red meets green, and now I can start mass fusion. But before I start to tower over the Commonwealth, now is the time to finish McCready's character arc. I warped to the med facility and began to crawl my way through. There really wasn't much to note in the dungeon dive. This is the first time I have ever done this quest before, so that's something. Just a lot of zombies turned frozen popsicles, and McCready typing in the password to get into the basement. There really wasn't much to note for the basement, just ensuring one feral ghoul after another frostbites the dust, and before too long we make it into the secret lab, give the glow stick a fun present, and obtain the critical cure. We rushed to a good neighbor and gave it to Daisy to get the cure to Duncan, McCready's son, and with that hopefully Duncan is saved, and I can finally dismiss McCready so I don't have to be a dick in every conversation. I brought Rudolph back into the fold, and now we can start cleaning up the base game. First up, I returned to Vault 81 to check in on Austin, and there is an emergency and it's up to us to save him. I love being the chosen one to solve everyone's problems. The vault is tricky because the mole rats here, if they bite you or for some stupid reason your companion, you get the mole rat disease, almost incurable. I did my best to kill the rats, and I was very twitchy with my spread damage, but close to the end I did get the bite of negative 10 HP, aka inconsequential. At the end of the vault, I meet my favorite companion Curie, and she gives us the cure, to go to either me or Austin. I give the serum to Austin because he needs it way more than me, and the vault is saved, and then I send the French robot to the castle for the final battle. The worst thing about the mole rat disease is having the permanent icon on the bottom right of the screen. Well, from one serum to another, I decided to get started on the Cabot questline, because family, I guess. The first quest involves raiding a shack in the far northern part of the map, and on my way there I thought I could hit up a couple more settlements. On my way to the slug I wiped out a super mutant camp that surprisingly isn't a settlement. As for the slug itself, for some reason they wouldn't want me to do a quest for them to join up. Oh well, I'm ahead on my settlement count anyway, so it isn't too much of a setback. I could raid the Ironworks to rescue Jake because, once again, family. Dysfunctional, but still. Normally I would have to be careful around flamethrowers, but since my ass has been down so many fireplaces, I just laugh at their firepower and stop them cold. More or less the hardest part of the place is trying to see through the bright flames and navigating the maze-like structure. At the end, I make sure to tell Jake it is a bad idea to throw someone into the lava, as the Revenge of the Sith is a pretty good demonstration. I had a snowball fight with Slag, and I came out on top while the ads threw themselves at me, and I could grab the explosive bobblehead, which might as well be overkill for my build, but oh well. I reunited the Finches, and gained another settlement. Next stop is the place I should probably be locked up in, and get the information that the bandits are in a cabin to the north. All the bandits here took a mysterious serum that makes them high as a kite, but my beans of ice is enough to cool them off. The next quest in the Cabot questline is Imogen Needs a Lover, a very quick quest if you know what you're doing. On my way to the amphitheater, I came across a bunch of raiders, and one of the legendary raiders had a very spicy sledgehammer. Like if this weren't a weapon restriction run, I'd most definitely be using it. Anyways, at the amphitheater, I picked the keys off the cult leader and talked to Imogen, and that quest is done already. I returned to the Cabot household, and there's some trouble at the asylum. I must have thought about playing Skyrim with a fork again. At the asylum, it is more or less your standard dungeon dive full of raiders, all mind controlled by Lorenzo or something to free him from his jail. There really wasn't much to this dungeon dive, except at one point I got the charisma bobblehead, which might as well be overkill at this point. After biting the heads off the gingerbread men, admit it, you all did it before, we arrive at Lorenzo's cell, apparently constructed back in the 1800s way before computers were made, but oh well. Well, there are two outcomes for this quest. Either you let the prisoner out and let him resume his reign of terror and killing his family, or letting Jack fry Lorenzo. Turns out the Cabots have been sucking on Lorenzo's juice so they can live forever. All that effort just to mimic a fraction of Santa's power. Either way, this family story was not going to have a happy ending, so I went with the better outcome of microwaving my meal because I'm too lazy to bake. Well, the Christmas story didn't have quite the happy ending I was expecting, but at least the quest is now off my list. At this point, I only had a couple of quests left to do on my to-do list before going for the DLCs, and one such quest is talking to a kid about a sea monster. I swim out to the waters and enter the submarine, and I meet with the ghoul responsible for creating the glowing sea. Now my pay is changed from by the hour to by the hour. First component is a coil from the forge, so it was a very quick dive to get the parts since I already cleared that dungeon out a few paragraphs ago. Next part of the quest is clearing out the reactor room of former comrades, and before too long I get a warhead. And the last part is putting stuff in the correct order, not wanting to get blown up. I relay the information and I get called out for the retail state of the holiday season, and I tell the kid about my tale in a somewhat honest way-ish. Well, that quest is done, and I thought now I could go hit up Green Tech. Since I'm all jacked to all hell, I am not very concerned with the climb up Green Tech, once again painting the walls red. Or I would say that, but it's more of a winter blue. With the rate I was blasting the enemies, the jog was extremely quick, and before too long I'm singing carols with the courser. I gave him an ice reception and got my ornament from his noggin, and I freed the synth and let her escape. I then let it snow into the snapping pit of free experience before getting my chip decoded at the railroad, and getting my blueprints from Virgil, and he wants a gift of a cure, which I obliged. Next up is the Institute, and given my hoarding for the junk shed that I more or less abandoned at this point, building the teleporter was nice and easy. Inside the Institute proper, I talked with a very great child and met up with Sean, who has been still alive for all this time. And so many missed Christmases. I forgot Mr. Snuggles this time, but the holidays are coming up, so I could give the gift then. I then talked to my faculty and entered the FEV lab, since that's the reason I'm here after all, and haven't been banished quite yet. There really wasn't much for the lab. The Assaultron wasn't of any concern whatsoever, just a frozen circuit board, and before long I can get my present for Virgil. And then I got my first mission from Father, and there is a very specific way I want to do these quests to match with going with the Minutemen, while also being a good person for the most part. I give Virgil his present, even though being cured of being a super mutant basically signifies his death warrant, but not my problem. Next up, I traveled to the castle and talked to Ronnie Shaw to get that quest done. Another prerequisite for getting the Minutemen ending after all. There wasn't much to note for the basement, just being cautious with my surroundings, making sure not to blow up my feet, for the most part, and telling Sarge who was in charge. The mission was pretty quick, while I did keep skipping steps and having to backtrack for Shaw a few times, but eventually I now have long-range person support for the raiders who have been extra naughty. While on my way to the Libertalia, I got me some chilled lobster, and paid the 300 caps to the Hagen beach for them to become my ally, and paying the ransom, which I didn't really care for at the moment. As for the ship proper, I made sure there was no hope for the raiders, and I was saving a couple crits for the raider with a fat man. This fat man does not want any of that nonsense. I then exercised my Christmas Eve stealth by getting on top of the ship by way of electrical wires, which is the secret no one is supposed to know about. As for the boss fight at the top, I returned the package that was sent to the wrong house, and then collected my payment for shipping. Instead of quick traveling away, I decided to swim across the waters and towards a nearby peninsula that I forgot exists, which there is another settlement ripe for the taking. Just had to clear out quite a few ghouls here. One of the ghouls had a legendary flamethrower. Oh, how the pyro would have loved that. I spent a while trying to find all the keys, and eventually after giving the glow stick hypothermia, I could claim probably my last settlement to get the ending, and then I returned to Father. The next mission is Bunker Hill, which I have a certain plan for. I brought along my courser companion for the quest, and together we infiltrated Bunker Hill, and since I'm allied with all 3 factions, nobody except for some turrets even bothered firing at me, so the trip was very quick. In the final room, I told the synths they were free to go, and put the courser on ice. I then traveled to the CIT ruins and told Father the truth, it was all me, and my conscience couldn't handle taking people away from their families any longer. He kicks me out of the Institute, but at least there is no bloodshed. Well, since I am now more or less done with the base game stuff until the finale, I thought I would now start clearing out the DLCs, and the first DLC I would do is Vault 88, if at least I could carry a holiday-themed vault. There really isn't much to Vault 88. At first I was clearing away some ghouls and rubble until I found the Overseer, who is not the friendliest, and together we built a vault. I do the menial task, open up the deeper parts of Vault, which include shortcuts to the overworld, and welcoming in test subjects, future residents. Truth be told, this is the furthest I have ever done the DLC because for all achievements you can just cap the Overseer at the beginning, reload the save and welcome in residents, and you are done with the DLC. Now we can begin tests and seeing what else is new, and the first one involves an exercise machine, which I do just that. Except I have no idea how to power on light, so yeah. Holidays ruined. Eventually by dumb luck, Clem lands on top of the entrance, which is very dumb luck, or at least normal for me. Well, you can do the test a humane way where the Overseer will be pretty annoyed with you, or played for sadism. Normally I would do the latter, but that isn't the Santa Claus way. The second test requires some stuff from a hallucin plant, where there's a chemical leak and everyone there is tripping hard on the overdose of peppermint flavored everything. Also during my dungeon dive I find myself a freezing meat hook, which I could technically allow, but I'm happy with my snowball cannon. Before long I grabbed my required part from the funky land and reported back to the Overseer, and this is the first time I've ever done that dungeon, so yeah. How did I miss that dungeon? I have no idea. Well, at this point I wrapped up the DLC by building a soda fountain and dispensing highly caffeinated products just below heart attack levels, which also happens to be how I survive in the mornings, and almost everyone is happy. The third test requires an eye exam and a trip to a cavern to farm some Uranisium. I did the humane option, though I did reload to do subliminal messaging. And lastly, I built a slot machine and picked the 10 luck in New Vegas option. I let the Overseer know and she is very upset that I roleplayed as a moral individual character for once, and she gets mad and leaves. And now the vault is happy and the DLC is complete. First proper completion, and yeah, the DLC is very forgettable. I had the message pop up and I returned to Jack and got myself Lorenzo's artifact, which I don't use, but hey, I can at least re-gift it yet again at the holiday party. Next up, I thought it was time I became robotic and do some Automatron next. Don't want to lose my job to cheap and crappy labor now. I traveled a little west of the regional office I rescued a hostage from, and fought quite a few robots of the hastily assembled variety. Once the robots were sent to the junkyard beneath the earth, I talked to our companion Ada, and she wants to avenge her friends who were like family to her. Hey, it's family, so time for some avenging or something. Starting from the castle, I took a nice relaxing swim through some waters with 200 years worth of fish crap and icerators before entering the factory. Despite being out of order for all this time, the factory sure is lively with many robots and propaganda iBots. These silly mechs are nothing to an army of elves Santa has at his disposal, and before long I gave the boss robot one hell of a case of brain freeze, then I talked to Ada and returned to Sanctuary. Back at my junkyard I built a construction depot and wired the beacon onto Ada, so now we can track her down in the dark. And now we have 2 more brains to collect, and the radiant location is in the absolute dumbest location. Literally just below the satellite array where Ahab is. The robots here weren't playing nice, so I had to punish the bots for picking on settlers. I talked to Ada and she tells me to go up the hill a little bit, which is a metaphor for the uphill battle we have to face, or something. At the Rust Devil Bay, rather than walking into a firewall, I walked around the fence and proceeded to expose the raiders to the fact that metal is a horrible insulator, so their bodies will get cold much faster than just cloth. Once the outside was taken care of, I started to climb through the satellite array to see why Starlink is horrible during rainy weather. With all my perks, the poor bandit reskins did not stand a single chance, and I had to up the difficulty a couple times at this point, and Santa Claus doesn't really care. Eventually I meet up with Jezebel with an E of sick perverts and stuff the brain somewhere on my body, and then I went Ahab on Ahab and the robot was sent to Ahab. During the escape I had to deal with the sarcasm bot representative of my inner demons, while also sending the red arrows to the deep freeze, and at the end is Ivy, not of the poison variety either, and very quickly she learned that freeze warnings mean you should cover up your plants. Afterwards we all escape, then I spent a while shopping trying to get enough parts so I have my personal sarcasm bot follow me around. Afterwards I get my schematics and stick an antenna on Codsworth so he can come along for a dungeon, I guess. Truth be told, he was just the first bot I saw. I got some unique dialogue for talking to him after meeting Sean, but before he dies, Plus, I have had the game crash on me before building robots before, and I don't fancy losing 40 minutes of recording in my mind. Then I took a swim over to Robco's HQ, but sadly no Securitrons will be able to harass me on a credit check. On the inside, I had Codsworth open a comically long door opening animation that's fan service to Fallout 3, then throw hands at the hordes of crap robots the game tries to throw at you. At one point, I was nervous when I was hacking a computer with an ominous red glow behind me, but the sentry bot was promptly delete system 32'd, and we could climb deeper inside the dungeon. I was leveling up quite frequently throughout the dungeon, and then more long door opening animations, and starting to get a little annoying. Before the end, I had to make sure that Codsworth gets on the platform because I remember my first and prior only time in the DLC I forgot to get my companion on the platform, and that was a fun time. Eventually we entered a room where brains were extracted from ghouls, and the truth behind the robo-brains. They were mass harvested, though if they were trying to harvest my brain they would either get nothing or something more snarky than Jezebel. As for the boss fight at the end, or so-called boss fight, it's a massive enemy gauntlet where the Mechanist sends out dozens of robots instead of fighting you head-on. I would just point in a general direction and click until the bots blew up, and between phases I fired at the bots on the ceiling like a Duck Gallery game, then came more bots. At this point they were throwing everything short of the kitchen sink at me. They should have at least offered cookies and milk first. Eventually the battle becomes an auto-scroller until the power goes out, and I can have a nice conversation with the Mechanist. Turns out the Mechanist is a girl who is very misguided and didn't know the robo-brains were deciding the best bet for humanity is extinction, thus justifying why everyone is paranoid about the AI uprising, and not just taking everyone's jobs just so the shareholders have prettier numbers to look at. Well, the DLC is now done, and I send my robots out to the castle for a big final battle. However, as you probably glance down at the runtime and seeing that there is quite a ways to go, the final battle won't be for quite a bit, as there is one pretty important DLC to do next. I journey to the far northeastern part of the map and talk to the Nakanos whose daughter went missing, and it is up to us to be detective and figure out the clues. However, since Santa Claus is all-knowing, that being has played the DLC once before, he knows to check the picture in the shed, and with the information can convince Kenji to send us to Far Harbor. I wish there was something interesting in the boat ride, but sadly it is nighttime so I can't see crap, plus it's foggy, and somehow I don't capsize during this excursion. It took me several talking to be able to protect the town from the gulpers, and I was able to protect almost everyone, but one person walked over mine so I can't really do much about that. While by focusing down the overgrown lizards, I could put them into the deep freeze, and I was able to save Jared at least. And at this point, I decided to help out the citizens of Far Harbor. First thing while picking up some side quests is using mysterious human Andre who is suffering, and getting the secret best outcome to the quest, so enjoy your immortality! Once I was done talking to almost everyone, I teamed up with Longfellow to hike up to Arcadia. The reason why Longfellow got his name is for his There really wasn't much going on during the hike up to Arcadia, just a tutorial mission showcasing the enemy variety you'll be coming up against throughout the DLC, such as trappers and gulpers and basic Skyrim enemies. After talking to a cultist, I entered Arcadia and talked to Dima. I didn't know I was playing the Talos Principle. What's next? Philosophy before hellish puzzles? Oh. Well, I talked to Kasumi and got the necessary information to go to the nucleus. Yeah, I don't want to do any hellish puzzles at the moment, so I thought I could go around playing on the island. First up, I proceeded to give ghouls at a quest location an ice time. The one was unfortunately on the porta potty. What a bad way to go. I marked a couple locations on the map, then I went up against my first fog crawler, which is basically an oversized Chars. Told you this is Skyrim. Then I continued my way south through the thicket until I got to a tannery to get some tools. Then I returned to the main town to turn in quests and get my next batch, which includes the captain's dance. Before my dance with death, I went around repairing fog condensers, easy enough. Then I went to the south a bit, telling whatever looks at me to chill out. While I was exploring the western part of the map, the game glitches out for me a bit, as it would not show updated quest markers, locations, and experience and whatnot, but to show a flex of dominance, I dropped the queen meat into the water, then icing anything that came out of it. Eventually a legendary Mirelurk queen came out to play, but it was of non-issue and now the town can eat for a week. Before returning to town, I began to climb a tower, except one of the trappers really wanted to blow themselves up. Then to optimize my exploration, I continued along the coastline, finding the building that you end up in during Adam's initiation quest, so neat I guess. I continued to decimate the local gulper population, then I came upon a lighthouse. It was more lights out for the trappers, as they were trapped in a building that would become their grave. The boss of the lighthouse wasn't all that impressive, but they did hit somewhat hard, so that amounts to something I guess. Once I finished cleaning out the building, I traveled from Arcadia over to the wrecked ship, and threw down with the raiders here. One of the first raiders I came across had a legendary Gauss raffle, so that was fun. The presence of Santa showing up was enough for a village to freeze dead in his tracks, dropping his grenade, and probably getting an icicle to the head, and a bonus ragdoll on the side too. and the rest of the ship cleanup was pretty straightforward. Not much going on, and I returned to town to turn in all my quests and get in the captain's hat, which if this wasn't December, I'd be wearing it just so I can play GameCube games without paying $300 for potentially scratched discs. I then get my last batch of quests here. The first one involves dragging a cranky gentleman back to his son, and all I had to do was ravage the local trapper population. Next up, I cleared out a local lumberyard of some shriveled up ghouls, nothing new here, and the last mission had me go to the far southwestern part of the map to kill some mirelurks for their carcasses, which feels pretty weird. I was expecting at least a queen or something, but I can't win them all. I returned back to Far Harbor, turned in the final quest, and I kinda forgot about the Red Death, but oh well, finishing helping out the town. All this was done because I don't want to do puzzles. I guess now to rip off the bandage. On my way to the nucleus, nothing much of note happened. Just continued unbridled annihilation of the local fauna and local residents, cold snapping them out of existence. When I got to the Children of Atom's HQ, I watched a small family feud, and then I had to run a small trial to be let into the group, and all I had to do was trip Jingle Bells on some funky water. I think the microbes are the least I'm concerned about right now. At the end of our little jaunt is a shrine that I've already cleared out not too long ago, so I'm playing with the periodic table, and then I'm let inside the cult. Instead of talking to the management, then again most of these quests probably would go against Santa's morals, I went inside the control center and began to clear out the machinery here, and nothing much to note happened until the end with the legendary Saltron. I was able to send it back to the fridge it came from, and got a rolling pin for all the gingerbread men I could cook up. Next up, I get to play in Minecraft Land. Yeah, nobody likes these puzzles. After a grueling 30 minutes, so I think I probably could have skipped the last two puzzles, now comes picking up presents from Christmas past. The first present is on an island to the far west. Just had to remind the trappers that they are trapped in with me, and also anglers are annoying, but oh well. Inside the dirt I get codes to disable the turbines keeping Far Harbor safe. How fun. The next present is inside the Vimpop factory, which has been overtaken by a bunch of super mutants. Before going inside, I made sure to ice the kicker. Inside the Vim factory, it seems the soda companies continue wanting to make crappy, horrible soda that sucks in every way, and this soda is filled with FEV. So basically every single energy drink I consume to keep myself awake. There wasn't much going on here, and I decided to open up the door to let Grunt out to play. This grunty behemoth was put out of commission, and I could enter the basement to dig up the body of Captain Avery, who was replaced by a synth. I also entered the lab room and grabbed myself the most appropriately named shotgun. If only if it weren't for weapon restrictions. The third present isn't in the burnt down town I came across that reminds me of my hometown. No, it is inside a hotel in the southern part of the island. On my way there, I did try to create the propaganda polar bear for wintertime commercials, but sadly all the icebergs melted, so I had to settle with the first B-list actor I could find, and there were two wasted for the job. At the hotel, I spent some time clearing out the exterior of the hotel, adding to my massive kill counter, and also getting me a harpoon gun, which gives me an idea for a run later on. Who knows? Inside of the hotel, that isn't much to write home about. There weren't any robot butlers to escort me around. Instead, I got a 1-star rundown hotel experience. At least I get the rumor of a nuclear launch key, so I leave the hotel and head on there, which happens to be on the complete other side of the island. I took a quick scuba dive into the waters and got me keys to some nukes. Oh, if only I weren't trying to roleplay as a mostly good man. All the fun I could have. Also, I don't go for the really good armor here. I already have the best armor of all. Plot. Back at Acadia, I confronted Dima about making me play an inferior puzzle game, along with all the stuff he conveniently forgot. And instead of making everyone turn on the place, I just say I will turn a blind eye. After all, Cena probably would have found out anyways if I weren't a popsicle for 200 years. And now we have choices on how to end the DLC. We could have everyone kill each other, turn off fog condensers, send the children of Atom to Atom, but nah, gotta be peaceful. Heading on to the holotapes, I came across a little building and I was jump scared by a giant hermit crab. I was scared, mostly because I never knew there were giant hermit crabs in the game. Anyways, located in a ditch is some holotapes from the former High Confessor, along with some information needed for peace. Back at Socrates' pad, I talked to Dima and we proceed to the next phase of the replacement plan. Back at the nucleus, I might have misplaced my step, but thankfully my years of falling down fireplaces proved useful. Inside the vessel, as tempting as it is to give a crazy man very fun toys, I want the High Confessor to be replaced by a lower salary drone to improve profitability to make the shareholder overlords happy. I'll lure him to the back rooms and tell him he is fired right before the holidays and he will not be getting his holiday bonus either because of some small print in the contract. At least the quest is resolved peacefully. I return to Dima, who is done orientating the replacement, and we get our bonus salary. And with that, the DLC is mostly done. I then talked to Kasumi and told her to come home for the holidays. After a quick boat ride back to the Commonwealth, the family is finally reunited after a very long detour, and the DLC is wrapped up in one nice Hallmark happy ending. Someone's gotta feel happy and cozy in this nihilistic world. Anyways, I dug up some treasure in an outhouse and I sure got shit on in rewards. Nothing I can use. Meh. Back at Sanctuary, I got the final level in the ballistic weave, so now I am a very tanky Claus. At this point, I'm good to finish my playthrough, but I decided for no good reason I could go on ahead and get the rest of the companions since I have nothing better to do in this 20-hour playthrough. First stop is the combat zone to rescue Kate, if only for the wonderful accent. As for the raiders inside the combat zone, I'm not locked up in a room full of bloodthirsty marauders. Oh no, quite the contrary. Once the audience has been vacated by my voice, just like most of my shorts, I talk to Kate and I'm gifted her contract, and I send her to the castle for what should be hopefully soon. I then went around the corner a bit and came across Trinity Tower, and sure I could help out Rex so he can join his family. The place is very funny with an actual good weapon. I just run through without really stopping, and the mutants can be put in place. Fist ends up heading himself in confusion for picking a fight with good old Nick. As for the ride down, since I have range, I can just put the mutants in the chiller, all the while Rex quotes my high school English class. I thought he'd be quoting the architect or something. Well, at the bottom, everyone is all joined up. Dogmeat gives me Strong's armor, which I ignore because I don't plan on bringing Strong along, but oh well. Mission complete. Strong arms himself into my castle group, and all that's left is Hancock. But first up, I send Deacon to the castle, and I take myself a high-tech sleigh to the Pridwin. At least that solves my Christmas Eve problem. I don't do much with the Brotherhood. I just get Dance as a companion, do some errands for free experience even though I don't need experience anymore, then send him to the castle as I snub off his boss for the rest of the game. Once that was done, I returned to Good Neighbor and talk to a wall and take a job for a big dig, which is honestly a weird quest to get a companion, but whatever. I entered the tunnel and cleared out some Mirelurks for the crew, collateral damage not intended, and I relayed the information to Bobby, and next up I need to spring someone from their jail. But before then, I give the power of high fructose corn syrup to Sheffield as a nice gift. I also take the time to send both Nick and Piper to the castle, and at this point it is all overkill, but as I say, there's no kill like overkill. I then persuaded a guard to let the guy out, and tell him I'm the gift that keeps on giving, which is a most appropriate response I guess. Next up comes a big heist, mostly leading an eyebot around to blow up walls. It's a miracle we don't get caved in. Besides a random Mirelurk king from a wrong turn, not much happened down here in the sewers, just took me a long while to figure out where to go because this is the second time I've ever done this quest. Eventually the tunnels lead into a subway and the Mirelurks turn into the Frosted Dead. Bobby really does nothing and is up to my splash image to save the day. Also, it's rather comedic how everything ragdolls around after being blasted. Before long we are under what is supposed to be Diamond City, cave in the floor and lose our friend in the blast, and we found out we dug in the wrong direction and ended up beneath Hancock's stash. I tell Bobby to piss off for deceiving us, and I get my greatest weakness from 32 degrees. I then return to Good Neighbor, have a nice chat with Hancock, and he gives a going away speech that he has been cancelled but will ignore the facts and play it off because he does not want to deflate his massive ego. And with all that, that is every companion added to the fold and sent to the castle, so when I get around to the final battle, I'm all good to go. With basically everything but one thing done, I figure I could go to Nuka-World. After all, the modern design of Santa was heavily popularized by Coke after all. Well, my friends, I somehow lost the footage for what happened at Nuka-World, but as it turns out the events coincidentally corresponds to an old wasteland story. A story about rescuing many family members, ending the brutality from some extra naughty raiders. Sit back and relax as old St. Nick regales his tale on how Santa stole back Nuka-World. 'Twas a cold December morning. Santa did receive a chilling warning. Trapped in Nuka-World, families were enslaved, and only by Nick could they be saved. To the transit center did Santa arrive. In the plaza he found a gunner hive. With his trusty cannon of ice, he stripped the gunners of their vice. A lone assaulter was amidst a horde, whose specs could have a night be gored. But Nick didn't care about the stupid bot. One volley and the circuit board was shot. Inside the tunnel, Santa found an injured Harvey, in no way related to one Preston Garvey. Santa offered Harvey a stim pack, and Harvey told Santa he was just a hack. Santa then turned on the power, so he can turn raiders into a bloody shower. Into the raiders' sadistic games he was played. Santa would perish, the raiders did prayed. In the first room were turrets galore, he froze their circuit boards to the floor. Many traps did the raiders lay, how pathetic, to Nick it was just play. 3 doors did Santa have to choose, he knew the correct answer, so the raiders would lose. Inside a room the barrels made the Geiger counter click, but with the Rad-X, it was just another shtick. To stop Santa's rampage, the aliens were employed, but a couple blasts and down went the android. While Santa could get lost in a maze by jumping on top the rest would get glazed. Next, Santa entered a dangerous minefield. He just sprinted on by to avoid the high yield, and stumbled he did into a mirelurk den, but turns out they taste great after cryogen. The observant Santa was at the line of death traps. With a sharp eye, he avoided all mishaps. Into a room there was a nasty gas leak, and it wasn't from a fart from the food in the last week. But the smell is nothing new for good old Nick. He typed in the password, which happened to be prick. Into the firing range that Santa stepped into, the grate he was able to at least shoot through. It was laughable, the poor raiders' attempts. Santa put their weak heads in contempt. At the end of the gauntlet, Coulter did taunt. For Santa, it was but another jaunt. With a squirt gun in hand, to hypothermia Coulter will land. Once his barrier was fried, many blasts of ice, and dead Coulter lied. Unknowns to gauge for soon be fate. Once he opens the door, it'll be all too late. A shot to the torso, his blood ran like water, and now Santa can commence unlimited slaughter. In the fresh sun, Santa began his cleansing. After all, open season was the quest he was sensing. The raiders immediately opened fire, and the corpses won't be sung about in choir. Operator or pack, their names didn't matter. The only fact is that their brains went splatter. Shank thought it would be wise to hide behind a flag. In the end, his remains would be stuffed in a bag. One by one they lined up in the firing line, making it easy for Santa to rip out their spine. A pathetic effort, the slavers tried to bring down this beast. The organs were splattered somewhere east. Rudolph, Santa's little helper, pinned down the raiders, all in an effort to make things easier for this holy crusader. When the pathetic villains thought they had old Nick pinned, Santa used his aimbot to send the degenerates to the wind. At this point, Santa was tired of playing nice, and he began using grenades made of ice. The shrapnel pierced their delicate skin, until finally the courtyard Santa did win. Mason's pack would be the first to feel Santa's wrath. Inside the den did Santa begin to carve a path. Every worthless raider here was affected with rabies, so it was humane to put down these scamps with scabies. They thought at first they had a chance to win, until Santa lined them up, making them pay for the sin. Their blood was chilled at the pellets of snow. Decorated with red, chaos Santa did sow. Mason descended in a worthless attempt to gloat. Santa butchered him, wearing his skin as a new coat. With the leader gone, Dick began to clean up. Next stop is the operators. Santa did not even say sup. He began shooting like an effective killing machine. Their blood fueled Santa like a heavy dose of caffeine. Despite the hypothermia, oh boy they bled, and Santa painted their walls a new shade of red. The two leaders, William and Megs, came out to play, and quickly did Santa begin to slay. A story from times of old, battered and dismembered, the leaders lied out cold. Last and most certainly least were the disciples. No god would accept these ingrates to the void for endless cycles. Santa entered the infested Fizz-Top Mountain, and immediately Nisha bled like a fountain. Root where the edgy degenerates attempt to be dope, Santa used their intestines to jump rope. The purification was all nice and simple. All Santa did was pop their heads like a pimple. Before long, the bases were all cleared out. One final place Santa did not forget about. Into the trader den, all the innocents had bomb collars, because the vile demons wanted a quick dollar. The last few raiders went down in a few quick blasts, and the traders were finally free at last. Santa decided to do an easy victory lap, a couple distractions that might slap. He first gathered at the gas station for no good reason, and descended on the Mirelurks for an act of treason. Ice-cold Mirelurk legs, an old holiday treat, he blasted at them until they were all beat. But a terrible monster ascended from the deep. The Nuka-World queen awoke from a sleep. Santa didn't care, she was but a small fry. A few blasts, and she was out to dry. Victory at last, Santa felt satisfied. The families of the Commonwealth could finally be gratified. The raiders were no more, peace could return. Just one final threat, and the cogs of fate began to churn. With that silly little distraction done, I returned to Diamond City, and just in time too, as it was right before Christmas Eve. But all isn't right in the Commonwealth, as the Institute was about to make a play to upheave the world forever. A gathering storm was on the horizon, and at the castle he rang a bell, and all the companions joined up as one big family, ready for the final battle. Well, it is showtime, so time to wrap up this run once and for all. I then returned to the sanctuary and finally remembered to talk to Preston about old guns, and immediately I get word to defend the castle, so I returned there, and in the afternoon the big battle commenced. I would say it was a long grueling battle that would be brutal, but nope. I think by having everyone joined up, the Sin stood absolutely no chance. Also helps out that the Brotherhood helped out, so Yeah, it was not that bad. I honestly didn't need to participate much in this battle, even with my very powerful weapons. I don't think the robots could even make it close to the castle. Instead, they were defeated in a blizzard of bullets and even pushed back all the way to their spawns. It was that one-sided. In the off chance they did make it to the courtyard, they didn't last very long. The battle was done in a matter of minutes. Sure, the coursers could go invisible, but my companions have aimbot mode on, so they didn't really care. Before long, the forces were routed, and we gave chase to the survivors. Don't mess with this family. I then talked to Preston, and while it is Christmas Eve and I do need to do my holiday rounds, there are more pressing concerns, like the Institute. I returned to the entrance to the sewers and began my lovely final dive. There wasn't much going on down here. Sure, I did have a glowing one drop in on me, but I won't be stopped by such a minuscule snowflake. The rest of the sewer dive wasn't that challenging. The ghouls turned into robots and they weren't wearing any winter clothing. After that, I called in my reinforcements and I get the most pressing garbage response I could ask for. There are better times to turn in side quests than in the finale, but honestly, I shouldn't expect less at this point with Fallout. As for the infiltration, the turrets were packing a little punch, so I had to play behind cover for quite a bit, and the synths crumbled to my ice cannon with ease. Well, after purifying an amusement park full of raiders, this was easy. As for the biolab, I tried not to attack any of the scientists. I'm not that heartless, but I do kill the synthetic Harambes. The courtyard was cleared out pretty quickly, good DPS plus I had backup for one, so the battle was a very quick one. Inside the director's office, I found a dying Sean, so stricken by my betrayal. It was sad that we couldn't see eye to eye, but it was time for the Commonwealth to finally stand on its own 2 feet. I wish I could save Sean, but his cancer is too far along and has resigned to his fate. Santa had a present for his son, a long-lost Mr. Snuggles, a gift from before hell broke loose. I put Mr. Snuggles in his bed, much like 200 years ago, as one last farewell, not as a duty as Santa Claus, but as a duty from a father. I then entered the evacuation code to save as many people as possible, then I left the office. Back outside, the synths were entering shutdown mode, reducing the resistance into the reactor. The charge there was much more straightforward, and before long we were all inside the reactor room. This was a more interesting charge, mostly because I decided to fight everything here. The grunt synths weren't too bad. It was the legendary ones that proved annoying, with their grenades and everything, but once the numbers started to bleed down, the way into the reactor was much more straightforward. I was able to plant the bomb, took the synth Sean with me since I can't spend Christmas with the regular Sean, then at least I could do with his protege. I then pressed the big button, lighting the world's largest Christmas tree, ushering in Christmas Day, and successfully completing Fallout 4 as Santa Claus. Hopefully you all enjoyed this very long run. Nothing much to say except hopefully you all have a happy holiday season, and I'll see you all in the new year. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochisms, and any other way I could torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and see you all in the next one.